join us momentarily. Susan Platt, she wants everybody to play nice. It's kind of interesting. So let me just tell you what's going on here. Susan Platt, one of three candidates running for lieutenant governor on the Democratic side, again, decided June 13th primary. Three candidates, Gene Rossi, former U.S. Attorney, Northern Virginia. Nice guy, by the way. Justin Fairfax, I've got him as a front runner in this race still, and he ran for Attorney General 2013. And he's a tireless worker. He's a good guy. And, of course, Susan Platt, former Joe Biden chief of staff and candidate for lieutenant governor. Susan Platt sends a letter to Democratic primary opponents, Fairfax and Rossi, asking them to sign the Democrats' deed and pledge not to engage in negative campaign tactics against one another. Obviously, Frank Wagner didn't sign the deed. Just called out Ed Gillespie, told him man up. But if there's no negative campaigning, obviously, Bryce Reeves didn't sign the Democrat deed. Who else didn't sign it? A lot of people didn't sign it. But if there's no negative campaigning, what on earth on the radio are we going to talk about? There'll be no fun. Joining us now, though, Susan Platt, in all seriousness, wants to get rid of negative campaigning in the LG race on the Democratic side. Hey, Susan, good to have you.
Good morning, John. How are you doing?
Well, if you take negative campaigning out here, what are we going to talk about on the radio?
Oh, there's lots to talk about. I'll tell you. You know, I was the last entrant into this race.
That's right, you were.
And by the way, I have to tell you, I'm still a little bit sore. I ran my 10K race on Sunday, and I did come in on top of my category, but I'm not going to tell you how many people ran in my category. That's for sure.
Well, the main thing is you ran it.
I did. I ran it. I run it every year, and I was glad to do it again this year. But that was on the heels of just having come from Chesapeake, which I'll talk about in a minute. But let me just say, what you're talking about with Frank Wagner and others is what I think people don't like about politics. I'm so glad that Gene Rossi has signed on to this pledge. I have been involved in a lot of campaigns, managed Chuck Robb's race, as you know, and Don Beyer, and been involved at founding Emerge Virginia. And what I have seen is that if Democrats focus on the issues during their primaries, that they are in better position to win in November. And that's what I want. What we have seen on the Republican side is quite the opposite, as just noted by Frank Wagner. My goodness, there is an attack website out there from one of the candidates against the other. Certainly, I'm not going to defend transvaginal Jill Vogel, but I don't think the Republicans running for lieutenant governor are focused on the issues impacting the Commonwealth, and I think they should. But that's not for me to say. If there's
wait a minute. There's a negative. Wait a minute, Susan. Susan.
Primary, I think it's a good time now to, as you put it, man up and say, let's put an end to it before it stops. Before it starts.
Susan, you just called Jill Vogel transvaginal Jill.
And let's just say that we stay positive on the issues for this primary. We have lots of ammunition and lots of different opinions between the Democrats and the Republicans that I do want to fight this race on. But I think in order for us to win, we have lots of things we can talk about. We don't have to make personal attacks against each other, and I don't want us to get down in the mud like the Republicans are. And I think that's what people want in this Commonwealth, and people are sick and tired of the same old politics, and I think it's time to change.
Well, Susan,
and frankly, John, I will tell you, I have not heard from Justin Fairfax. You have his number. Why don't you call him and ask him if he's going to join with us or not? Gene and I are on board. We'd love to have him join us.
I'll ask him as soon as we get off the air.
That's great. That's great.
And I'll text his answer out.
Now, know, I'm no shrinking violet when it comes to fighting for what I believe in. But I think that we need to focus our energies on looking towards November in the Republicans. I think, yes, we can have a great debate as Democrats leading up to June 13th. But there's a lot of things we agree on. But there are some things, of course, we disagree a little bit on some of the ways to fix some of these problems. But mainly, we agree on a lot of different things. And I think it's time we focus just on the issues and not on any personal attacks like we've seen on the Republican side.
Well, Susan, you just called for no negative campaigning and no personal attacks. And in the same breath, you call a state senator, one of your potential opponents running for lieutenant governor, Senator Vogel, you call her transvaginal Jill Vogel. I mean, isn't that a personal negative attack?
No, it's not. Didn't she put forward the transvaginal bill? And I will tell you what I'm talking about.
What's that got to do with it?
You're either on the issues, and that's an issue.
So you're against negative campaigning only if it's negative on you.
And I will tell you, last week I was at the Chesterfield Chamber of Commerce breakfast, and I spoke in front with Frank Wagner and Bryce Reeves and Jill Vogel, and there was one or two other folks there, and I forgot who else was there. And I got up in front of the audience, and I looked at Jill, who was sitting at a table right across from me, and I said, there aren't that many things, issues that I agree with Jill Vogel on, but she and I agree on one thing. It's time we have a woman lieutenant governor. And I went over that table and I shook her hand. Now, I will fight every day when it comes to issues that I believe in and believe that are right, but I will not make personal attacks.
Well, you just made a personal attack. You called her transvaginal Jill.
Transvaginal bill? Absolutely.
Well, you didn't say she voted.
100%.
Susan, you didn't say she voted for the transvaginal bill. You called her transvaginal Jill. That's a personal attack.
That's what she put that bill for, did she not? And you know what? I'm not talking about playing nice when it comes to Republicans. I'll be glad to fight as hard as they will for what I believe in and what I believe is right. But I will not attack my fellow Democrats.
All right, so it sounds like, so you got Gene Rossi to sign it, and you don't want to do any negative campaigning within the three of you. I'll have to talk to Mr. Fairfax and see what he has to say. But some people could say that you're doing this because you don't want negative attacks on your own campaign.
I have been as transparent in my life and what I have done, and more transparent, I believe, than anyone else in this race. I have listed all clients. I have listed what I've done. I have been very upfront with everything I've done in my life, and I'm very proud of it. And I'm very proud of the fact that I have John Boyd, who's president of the National Black Farmers Association, supporting my campaign. I'm very proud that I have Emily's List supporting my campaign. I'm very proud that I have Jan Scruggs, the founder of the Vietnam Veterans Wall, supporting my campaign. And just on Saturday, I was down where you are today in Chesapeake. So I'm very proud that I was attending Senator Lionel Spruill's pancake breakfast. And when he introduced me to the mayor of Chesapeake, he said, you know, I was supporting someone else in this race, but this is the woman I'm going to support because I think she's our right candidate. So I'm very proud for all that support I have all across the Commonwealth. All
right, so you got Senator Lionel Spruill to publicly back your campaign today.
He said this to the mayor on Saturday. He has to decide how public, I guess, he wants it to be. But I figured when he tells the mayor of Chesapeake that I can repeat it.
I would say so. And for those that don't,
he's someone I've known for 20-some years. You know,
he's a good guy. For those,
an activist and an advocate.
No, he's a good guy. For those that don't know,
Virginia Jobs and Virginia Democrats for over 25 years, and I'm proud of that record.
He's a good guy. He's not my state senator, but he's right next to me where I live, and I've had him on my show several times, and Lionel is a really, really good guy. So getting his backing, there's a lot of people means a lot because he's a very sober thinker. But look, Susan, I got to be honest. I mean, I get where you guys are coming from. You want to take advantage of the anger out there within your base. But every press release I get from your campaign, basically this is what it says. Trump sucks. I mean, what are you going to do as lieutenant governor other than you don't like our president? Because that's your whole campaign seems to be based on Trump sucks. What else you got to do as lieutenant governor? Give us some meat.
Well, I think I've given you some meat over the last couple of months, but I'll be glad to talk about it again. No worries there. As a matter of fact, there are, as I talk about at my age in life and my stage in life, I've lived a lot of, I've had a lot of circumstances that have been challenging, certainly, and circumstances have been great. And I'm very proud of what my husband and I have accomplished in our years, 37 years of marriage, and I'm very proud of my family and what they've come through. But as you know, I think I've told you, my pops was one of 13 children who grew up in the steel mills of Pittsburgh. He was the only one to go to college on the GI Bill, and he taught modern dance too. I have to add that. My mother diagnosed with breast cancer when I was 5 and died when I was 9. So I was raised by my pops. So I always thank the men in the audience to say I wouldn't be here today, the strong woman that I am, had it not been for him empowering me to be that person. And I often wonder what would have happened to me if my pops hadn't been there. Mm-hmm. I could have gone off the rails very easily. As you know, I talk about my stepdaughter, Karen, who for more than 14 years, I talk about a little bit less, but I don't like to talk about the amount of time that she was an addict. But she was an addict for a long time, and we lost her to that addiction less than 2 years ago. And if my husband and I hadn't been able to step forward when our grandchildren were young and make sure they had a roof over their head and food on the table, and make sure they were in a secure environment, I'm very afraid what would have happened to them. And I know there are families all across this Commonwealth dealing with this. That's why I believe part of what our problem is with the number one in school to prison pipeline. So one thing I pledge to do is I will push for a children's advocate on the governor's cabinet to coordinate all the disparate service entities in this state. For example, health doesn't talk to public safety, doesn't talk to education. If the schools don't talk to public safety when a kid acts out, we all know what happens. Each organization is siloed. Mandated services are not accessible because people can't find them. And this is not just an idea that it's come to me. I got this idea from the grassroots, from the actual parents and caregivers of many of these children all across the Commonwealth saying they just want to know what they can do to help their children to make sure they get on the right path. The second thing that I talk about doing is economic security. And I talk about bridging the opportunity gap with an opportunity platform. As you know, I served in the Virginia Tourism Corporation Board. And in the Northern Neck one time, a fellow came and put down a gold oyster shell and said, we let Maryland take the crab from us. Let's not let them take the oyster. And so as a result, you know, we have oyster trails. We have lots of small businesses that have sprung up. And the oysters clean the water. I pledge that I will go to every community, every city, every locality in the Commonwealth, sitting down with their local elected officials, their community leaders, their activists, and trying to help them forge a more secure future, not 10 years down the line, but 20, 30, 40 years down the line, and help them find what would be their gold oyster shell. Because I think that's what we need to do with the people in the Commonwealth. I think we need to reassess some of the policies we have with small business. I talked to a fellow, Tommy Kellums, in the Northern Neck recently, and he's a fourth-generation business owner of the same business, and he wants to let his daughter take over the business in the next few years. And he said, we have so many different overlapping regulations. The Commonwealth of Virginia does a whole lot better than the feds. Why can't we see about combining some of these services? So I think that's something we also need to look at. And there's many, many more. But, John, those are the two things I will focus on, children and families and economic security.
All right, Susan, I got a couple of questions. You mentioned you're opposed to the poverty to prison pipeline. So am I. Marijuana. Are you ready to make small amounts legal in Virginia and get out of taking people's driver's license away and putting this on their record? Are you ready to take that step?
I'm ready to take the step in favor of medical marijuana. And
but not small amounts of marijuana.
Before. I want to look a little bit more at small amounts, but obviously the penalty should not be what it used to be. It should be very, very minimal. Until we pass a law that says we can do it. Okay,
what about suspending driver's licenses for small amounts of marijuana?
I don't see where that helps people at all. Unless it's something like drunk driving. Suspending their license means they can't make a living. And if they can't make a living, they're not a productive citizen, and all the more opportunities for people to go off the rails.
Okay, we just had Senator Wagner on, whether he's the gubernatorial candidate on the Republican side or not. If he doesn't win, he's going to stay in the state Senate. He's the chairman of the Commerce and Energy Committee, and that is not going to change if you were to be lieutenant governor if he does not win. Now, here's my question. He is for a floor in the gasoline tax in rebuilding Virginia's infrastructure, doubling the tax like they have it in North Carolina. Are you in favor of that or not, and why?
I've heard about raising the floor in some localities for the gas tax. When the floor was put in, the gas tax was different than it is right now. It was not as low as it is now, so I think that floor needs to be raised. I won't put a number on it because I think we need to look at it better, but I do think it needs to be raised.
Okay, so there's no question we have transportation issues in Virginia. That's going to be an issue in this campaign, regardless of who the nominees are. There's really only two ways to build roads, tolls or taxes. That's it. You either have to toll them or you have to increase taxes. I guess the third alternative is don't do anything. Which of those are you in favor of and why?
Well, I think we need to get the feds a little bit more involved. You know, Donald Trump, your president, keeps talking about infrastructure. I'd like to see that happen. I'd like to see more roads built in Virginia, but I'd also like to see us be a little bit smarter. I'd like to see that we push more rail. You know, when I was on the Tourism Corporation Board, we talked about bringing in lots of people through Dulles from Europe. How do people travel in Europe, John? They travel by rail.
Yep.
They come here and they have to have a car. And they have a car that sits in traffic for hours and hours. I was just coming back from Richmond on a Sunday afternoon last week, and it took me over 3.5 hours to get from Richmond to Northern Virginia. We're not doing something right. So I do think we have to look at more rail. We do have to ask President Trump, where is the infrastructure? We'd love to get that going.
Okay, so you want more money for roads from the federal government?
Absolutely.
So are you in favor of taxes or tolls for roads?
I don't think it's that simple. I don't think it's just that simple. I think we need to work with the feds to see how we can get some more roads built. I think obviously there are some instances that tolls are good, but tolls can be regressive, can hurt people with that are making what I believe a below livable wage in Virginia with a $7.25 hour salary. It's harder for them, and we need to have more bus lines. We need to have more mass transit. So I really the tolls can be difficult, but they're working in some places. I just really think we need to look at this a little bit better and plan out a little bit better for the next 20, 30 years, not the next 2 or 3 years. And right now we're playing catch up, as you know.
We got time for one more question. Susan Platt with us, running for lieutenant governor on the Democratic ballot, and that'll be decided June 13th. Former chief of staff for Joe Biden. Susan, Dominion rate deal 2015 basically said, look, we're going to have this clean power plan. We don't know what it's going to be. So we negotiated a rate freeze over a 10-year period of time, but along that, no audits. So we don't know how much money they make. They're, of course, normally capped at 10%. Anything over that, they give back to people that pay the rates. A deal's a deal. Are you in favor as lieutenant governor? Would you be in favor of staying with that deal? Because Dominion Power say, look, rates are down. What's your beef? Other people are saying, well, the whole deal changed. If you're lieutenant governor, how would you come down on the Dominion rate freeze deal of 2015?
Well, you have a good point. A deal is a deal, but circumstances do change. And I think Chap Peterson has caught on to a good idea in regard to this, and I think it's really something we need to look into a little bit deeper next session. I think that, I oppose the pipelines. As a matter of fact, in the next couple of days, I'm going down on a pipeline tour. You'll love it, John. Why don't you come along? Because we're talking to a lot of folks who really are opposed to the pipeline because it's going through their property, their farms. They do not believe we need it, and we do need to focus more on renewable energy sources. So I do think Chap Peterson's on to something here, and we really need to take a look at it.
Well, if I came with you on that pipeline tour, I would have a sign that says, please build the pipeline so we can get thousands and thousands of jobs in Virginia. So we'd be on opposite ends of that. But, Susan, I really appreciate the time. We're out of time.
You know it's not thousands and thousands of jobs.
I got to roll. It is thousands of jobs, Susan. Thousands and thousands of jobs.
No,
but look,
it's not.
Thanks for being with us. We appreciate you.
Thank you, John.
More information, Susan Platt for VA.com. Susan Platt for VA.com.